Good morning. I want to talk today about how the upcoming lunar month from November 13th to December 12th will impact Israel. And once again, I've done another video on just sort of the general effect of the lunar month's transits on the entire world. That sets the backdrop for everything. So it's good to look at that one along with this one. Anyway. Let me see if I can go ahead and share my screen. And I just need to take care of a couple of housekeeping things, get some things I can see out of the way. And let's see, I think we're ready to go. So this is the lunar month for Israel from November 13th, 2023 through December 12th, 2023. And just a quick reminder of some of the astrological conditions behind this current conflict between Israel and Hamas. If we look at Israel's birth chart for May 14th, 1948 at 4 p.m., Tel Aviv, we have the sun in opposition to Chiron. Okay. And what does this mean? Well, recall that the real purpose of Chiron is to urge us to transcend, to go beyond the visible world we see into that which is not so visible to our eyes or even our brains in some respects, to go beyond the world that our brains have created that looks very solid and concrete. However, in the process of nudging us towards transcendence, wounding often occurs because that hard shell that Saturn has erected in order to make everything concrete to us, that has to be cracked. Okay, those cracks let the light in and let the inner light out. And then that wounding, that cracking is followed by healing, hopefully, and then eventually by transcendence. So, this is a very interesting aspect because it represents Israel's potential as a light unto the nations. The sun in this chart represents the self, the soul of the nation, and Chiron at its best represents that light, that transcendence. And it's with an opposition, Israel is trying to integrate that light with its soul, and then it can be a light unto the nations. However, at not so such lofty levels of expression, Chiron results in wounding. And this can be either wounding that others cause to Israel, wounding that Israel causes to itself, or wounding that Israel causes to others, right? Quite often when Chiron is being activated, the nation or person may get wounded, or they may wind out wounding others instead, or both. Now, on October 7th, when the horrific attack on Israel by Hamas occurred, the general transits did not look good. We had Mars conjunct the lunar nodal axis, which intensifies its warlike nature, or any aggressive or assertive nature. All aspects of Mars are intensified, but Mars is squaring Pluto, and that is a very volatile combination. Mars, aggression, Pluto, death and transformation. And Pluto was still with an orb of squaring the lunar nodal axis also, so that's intensifying things. And then the trigger for all this was the moon, which was opposite Pluto, setting things off. But why did this impact Israel so much and not other nations? Well, here is why. At the same time, you had a pretty strong opposition of the sun to Chiron in the sky. This resonates with the Sun Chiron opposition in Israel's natal chart. And then, if we look specifically at how these transits are affecting Israel, we see that the planet Uranus is in conjunction with the Sun opposite Chiron. It's strongly activating that Sun Chiron opposition in Israel's chart. Uranus at its best, it's higher creativity, genius, but it's also unexpected changes, breaking up of the existing pattern. So things were suddenly shattered, literally shattered in Israel as uh, Hamas broke through the barriers, shattered those barriers to enter the country. Now, we also have transiting Neptune, making squares with natal Uranus opposite natal Jupiter, squaring both Uranus and Jupiter. Again, Uranus represents uh, sudden things happening. Jupiter expands things. And since Jupiter is in Sagittarius, which can represent other countries, other lands, this sudden thing that happens could represent people from outside of Israel. And with Neptune squaring this, Neptune dissolves the boundaries between things, but also represents deception and things that were not clear. And sure enough, Israel was caught flat-footed. Its security forces failed to detect what was going on prior to this invasion. We also have transiting Jupiter, squaring Pluto, which is in the 10th house. So this is also creating a crisis for Israel's leadership. And among other things, there is growing criticism of Netanyahu and the Israeli government, the leadership in that government. So this is how things looked on October 7th when Hamas invaded. And when you take all those astrological factors into consideration, it becomes pretty clear why things happened. Okay, now the upcoming lunar month goes from about November 13th through December 12th. Here I have some transits for the entire months of November and December, and there's a couple of things I want to point out in particular. First, we still have Neptune square Uranus, and that's going to be getting a little stronger as we go through November. And this can cloud things a bit. It can make people make rash decisions based upon feelings rather than facts or logic. Okay. And the opposition of transiting Uranus to natal Chiron becomes exact on the 4th. Mars squaring natal Saturn is also exact on the 4th. So there has been anticipation that violence and wounding may ratchet up, may increase, and reach a momentary peak around November 4th. And that does indeed seem to be what's going on. We also have transiting Mars uh, in opposition to the true north node in Israel's chart, which means it's conjunct with the south node. That was exact on the 1st of November. And that also intensifies things. Whenever the lunar nodal axis is involved, whatever it's touching tends to be intensified. So this whole period from the 1st to the 4th, yes, we have seen a lot of destruction and a lot of wounding by Israel on Gaza, and also Gaza, Hamas still attacking soldiers of Israel. Now, as we continue through November, things still aren't looking good. Mars is going to be very prominent. It's conjunct natal Chiron on the 11th, more wounding one way or the other. It's in opposition to the Sun on the 15th. Uh, Aggression uh, runs pretty strongly. And then transiting Mars will be square natal Mars on the 21st of November. So there's a lot of wounding, a lot of aggression going on during the month of November. In December, uh, hopefully things will get a little calmer. We do have Mars in opposition to Mercury on the 8th, but Mars will now have moved on from Scorpio, where it can be very warlike, into Sagittarius, which represents group mind, group thoughts and beliefs, communication with others. Um, Mars will be in Sagittarius in opposition to natal Mercury in Gemini. Uh, Still somewhat volatile, aggressive, but this may represent difficult discussions rather than difficult fighting. We also need to keep an eye out for Mars opposition Uranus on the 27th and Mars conjunct Jupiter. Uh, that starts, it doesn't happen exactly in the month of December, but toward the end it starts to grow. But I'm hoping that by this point, things have moved on from fighting to negotiations, which will probably be very difficult at best. Okay, now there are also some midpoints which will be triggered during the months of November and December. And I have highlighted those which concern me the most. And you can see that in most of them, Chiron is involved, which can indicate some wounding. And midpoints are like breaking points or turning points. And it is common for events to happen around those particular points. So on the 13th, we have the midpoint between transiting Uranus and Neptune will be in opposition to Israel's ascendant. Unexpected things can happen. On the 21st, Chiron will be in opposition to the Moon Jupiter midpoint. This could be wounding that particularly affects the people of Israel. On the 24th, Saturn will be in opposition to the Mercury Chiron midpoint. This is wounding coupled with thoughts or discussion, coupled with the restrictive influence of Saturn. On the 29th, we have Jupiter in opposition to the Chiron ascendant midpoint. This could be wounding to Israel, and Jupiter tends to magnify things. So those are the midpoint activations that concern me the most. Keep an eye on these dates and see what happens around them. Now, there are four charts I want to look at in particular. I want to look at the new moon in Israel, the first quarter moon in Israel, the full moon in Israel, and the third quarter moon in Israel. Those are times of particular tension throughout the month. And we're going to see a lot of the same aspects still prominent during these periods. So they tell the story uh, of this particular lunar month. So let's see. On November 13th, we still have Uranus activating the Sun Chiron opposition in Israel's chart, wounding one way or another, still going on. But at the new moon, we have a conjunction of Sun, Moon, and Mars in Scorpio. That by itself is very volatile. Mars is the co-ruler of Scorpio along with Pluto these days. And this puts an emphasis on strong feelings, emotions, and things like revenge and retribution are not uncommon. And this time, this new moon, it is uh, close to the lunar nodal axis, which intensifies things, but is very much in conjunction with natal Chiron. So uh, the fighting, the intensity, the wounding could be very much intensified around this point. And as we see, I think this whole week from November 13th through November 20th, when I believe we get to the first quarter moon, uh, that is a very dangerous week. Remember, though, that I'm giving only a weather report. What actually happens in the real world depends upon the decisions people make. They can decide to not follow these urges, or they can just uh, go with these astrological urges wholeheartedly, in which case there probably would be a lot of fighting, a lot of wounding. Now, we also have transiting Neptune still square natal Uranus. Uh, that can cloud the situation, result in very rash decisions being made by Israel. And the transiting lunar nodes are conjunct the ascendant and the descendant, and they are squaring the midheaven. This puts quite a bit of focus on the leadership of Israel and could result in a lot of criticism of that leadership. And the focus is also on Israel itself, its survival, and threats from others. Okay, so one way or another, survival of Israel, threats from others, its leadership, those are going to be points of focus for the entire month, along with probably a lot of wounding. This sets the tone for the lunar month, and rash decisions possibly made with uh, cloudy information, emotions which are not clear. Okay, if we move on to the first quarter moon, uh, not much has changed here. We still have transiting Uranus stimulating that Sun Chiron uh, opposition, and we still have, uh, let's see, Neptune squaring Uranus, and the lunar nodal axis conjunct the ascendant descendant squaring the midheaven, those same intensities. What we have, which is new, is that transiting Sun and Mars are going to square natal Mars right here, and transiting Moon and Saturn are going to be opposite natal Mars. Well, this is making things worse. Uh, Sun and Mars are exactly conjunct to the minute on the 17th of November, but by the 20th of November, the first quarter moon, they're still exactly conjunct to the degree. They haven't moved that far apart. It's making a very strong square with natal Mars, and the opposition from Saturn and the moon, that is intensifying things, right? And increasing the amount of aggression and restriction and frustration. Okay, so around this time, this may be when fighting and destruction of various sorts reaches a peak. And that whole period from the 13th through the 20th is pretty dangerous from an astrological point of view. Okay. And let me also point out that traditionally, the new moon, the quarter moons, and the full moon, there are times of greater intensity, greater stress. And this has been borne out by scientific studies done by people outside of astrology who just scientifically study relationships between moon phases and solar activity on life on Earth. And statistics has borne out that various things are more likely during these particular phases of the moon. Things like more accidents, more aggression in emergency rooms at hospitals, more aneurysms, more strokes, higher blood pressure. So these are times of intensity, and they set the stage and tell the story for this lunar month. Now, if we go on to the full moon, again, uh, some of that intensity on the first quarter moon will have faded, but the main things still remain. The Sun Chiron opposition still being stimulated by Uranus, Neptune still squaring natal Uranus, the lunar nodes still conjunct the ascendant, descendant, and squaring the midheaven. So those are things which continue throughout this entire lunar month. And moving on to the third quarter moon, those same aspects are still there. So those are the aspects which represent the underlying theme for this month. Things will become really intense, most likely between the 13th and the 20th. Uh, Wounding, probably, and we're seeing this already. It's very intense from the 1st through 4th November, when transing Uranus is exactly opposite Israel's natal Chiron. Okay, now if we look a little further ahead, just looking at some conjunctions, squares, and oppositions from outer planets, uh, a lot of what's going now is probably going to continue in one way or another for the next few years. In this year, 2023, back in the spring, we had Uranus squaring Saturn. And then there are 3 times that Uranus makes an exact opposition to Chiron. It did that once on June 24th, again on November 5th. Well, this would be November 5th, I think, in Israel, November 4th, here in Scottsdale, where I am. And then next year, in 2024, around April 14th. So that'd probably be April 12th in Scottsdale. This one is going to be important because it happens right after the April 8th solar eclipse, which I'm going to talk about that in a separate video. That is an eclipse that sets up the potential for a whole lot of wounding for the entire world, and it will in particular affect countries and people like America, Israel, Hamas, Iran, Vladimir Putin, and maybe also Donald Trump to some extent. So, what is happening now with Uranus stimulating that Sun Chiron opposition? That's going to be continuing for a while. And then that is followed by periods where transiting Uranus will be conjunct the natal sun of Israel. That's going to happen once in 2024, but toward the very end of the year and into 2025, it happens a couple of more times. And this is going to be a very extended period of conjunction, still stimulating that Sun Chiron opposition in Israel's natal chart. And so this is when some bad things could happen. This could be a very volatile period. And then that is going to be followed by periods of transing Uranus square natal Mars, which go into 2026. As you see, once more, we have one passage of that around June 4th in 2025. But then toward the end of 2025 and into the first few months of 2026, it's very strongly sustained. These bars usually represent a 1-degree orb. So we have two exact squares and it stays within orb this whole time. So a lot of what's going on now may continue one way or another into 2024 and beyond into 2026. So uh, just looking at conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, uh, things do not look settled or peaceful for the next few years for Israel. Uranus always breaks up the existing pattern. Let us hope that the pattern is broken up through creativity, which gets us out of the cycle of violence. That would be very nice. But when you're looking at nations, groups of people, uh, the more, uh, how should I say it, the more dire interpretations often seem to be more likely because not everyone is all that advanced. So hopefully some people will come up with creative solutions that can get us out of the cycle of violence. But disruption that's uncomfortable may be more likely. Okay, so in summary, I suspect that Israel will likely continue to wound and be wounded throughout this lunar month from mid-November through mid-December. This current cycle of violence may peak around November 20th, and that whole week from the 13th to the 20th is has the potential to be very volatile. Things did not look good at the first quarter moon on the 13th. On the 17th, Sun and Mars are exactly conjunct in Scorpio. That's volatile. And then the 20th looked very volatile. Also, a focus on Israel's leadership may intensify one way or another. That could result in either intense support or intense condemnation and criticism. And then repercussions of Israel's current conflict will likely continue until 2024 and maybe even uh, into 2026. So this should be of the current conflict of Israel. It will likely continue one way or another for quite a while, either with direct fighting or some sort of aftermath. Okay, well, that is it for this coming lunar month in Israel. So I've stopped sharing my screen. This is a very volatile period in history, and all I can recommend is that, uh, as I always say, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, pray, meditate, visualize uh, light surrounding the darkness and breaking it up. Pray for peace. Do what you can to pursue peace. There is wounding, tragedy on both sides of this fight, and innocent people being hurt on both sides. So also give to your local charities. Your local food bank is good. Giving to humanitarian organizations that can provide humanitarian assistance to both sides. That is also good. Um, this is a difficult situation with uh, no easy answers and lots of moral quandaries. So um, I certainly fault Hamas for all its continued violence and for starting this war and the horrific things it did when it attacked. Uh, what are the right responses and so forth. I'm not placing any judgments on that because so many different decisions, whether you decide one way or another, it seems like so many people will get hurt. Uh, but I just hope and pray for peace and an end to this conflict. Um, I'm going to focus on how things should be rather than on criticizing how things are right now. But for the coming month, the astrological weather is not that great. And sometimes all you can do is simply pray that people make the best decisions going forward rather than the worst decisions. And with that, I wish you all peace, and I'll say so long and be well, kind to yourself and to others. So long.